Welcome to Podcast is Code, a show about the operation side of the software development lifecycle. I'm Mitchell Scott.
And I'm Gabe Cook.
Today, we're going to interview a tech CEO. But first, some current events. I guess we'll start off with where have we been for the last few months? We ran into some scheduling issues with our interview guest, and then it kind of rolled into the holidays and the start of a new year, and kind of got out of the groove of recording, and we finally were able to get our interview stuff lined out, and we're back.
We're back at it. It was funny. Every time there were a couple times we were like, should we think up a topic, choose one, and go ahead and record? But then we would start scheduling again, and scheduling conflicts are rough.
Yeah, we ran into a lot of scheduling issues kind of over the end of the year and beginning of the year. But we're back, and we should be back on our normal fortnightly schedule. So you should get as much of us as you want now.
Unless you want more than fortnightly. If that's the case, listen to old episodes. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to hear from us more often, let us know in the Discord, I guess.
Some current events. None of this feels super recent, but there was one I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Weaveworks, the company that initially created Flux CD. They made, a Terraform operator, a UI for Flux. I thought they did a lot of cool things. They closed down shop at the beginning of February. I do want to comment publicly, just so everyone's aware, that Flux itself is safe if anyone uses Flux. It was adopted as a CNCF project, so it has a whole team of people working on it, even without Weaveworks. But it's still sad news, because I thought they did really cool things on the Kubernetes operator side of things, and was always looking forward to their releases. So
yeah, it is a bummer.
Bit of a surprise, yeah.
Yeah, and it kind of paired with, we didn't even get to talk about some of the latest. I know we started talking about the Terraform and HashiCorp licensing saga at the end of last year, but then we were kind of in our little hiatus whenever the news dropped that Mitchell Hashimoto left HashiCorp. And HashiCorp's pretty good bastion of open source succeeding in the market, and with their licensing changes, and then with the founder and the main guy, the guy the company's named after, with him stepping away. So there's that aspect, and then also Weaveworks, another kind of prominent open source business that seemingly was succeeding. With them closing down, it's kind of a little bit bleak in the open source DevOps tool space.
Yeah.
Kind of just goes to show how hard it is to build good tools and in a way that's kind of open, but also be able to monetize them enough to sustain a business, which is tricky because that's how it's how you are able to hire developers to build the good tools, right? You don't it's nice when there's a corporation backing a tool, because it means it's not one guy's tool that if he, gets sick or wins the lottery or whatever and disappears for a while. Yeah. Well, and we've seen burnout in the open source world a lot too, right? You've got one guy maintaining a package for forever, and then just via life or some of the community turning a little toxic and expecting their features to get built and shipped, it kind of makes that guy go, well, screw this. I'm doing all this for free. I can't even quit my day job to maintain this. And that's just assuming one guy's working on a tool. Something like Terraform or Flux is a team of developers building.
Yeah. I mean, I guess really the takeaway for a lot of this should be, if you see an open source project that you really like and they have a way to sponsor it and you have the means, you might consider it. I actually don't sponsor any projects at the moment, but lately I've been considering a few that, I host in my house or save me a lot of time. Might as well give them a little bit of money every month for the great work they do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't sponsor anything either. I probably should sponsor at least Home Assistant and stuff that I use every day.
Yeah, actually, I guess I do sponsor. I do pay for Nabukasa.
Okay, yeah,
I have a monthly subscription, even though I don't really use it, and I every time I've thought about canceling, I hover over the button. I'm like, but I like supporting them.
Yeah,
So.
I guess I do pay for Bitwarden when I don't really have to.
Yeah.
That's partly because I'm lazy and $10 a year is cheap. But I really enjoy using Bitwarden. So happy for them to have my less than $1 a month.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But yeah, even at like the company we work at, like we use a lot of open source software, and it's kind of how we do our business. Like, I mean, we're using Kubernetes, we're using Flux, we're using various other open source things for our company to like make its profits. And yeah, I don't know that we pay for licensing for certain things, but like if there's an open source tool out there, we're gonna take advantage of that. That's part of the benefit of using open source, is it lets you try things out and see if it's going to work for you. And then I guess ideally, if it works out really well, then you should probably contribute back. It's a problem with the open source software ecosystem. It's really hard for devs to get paid.
Mm-hmm. And my solution is usually, if like I've worked in a lot of different coding languages, so if there's a bug or something breaks, I will happily figure it out and open a PR. I have a lot of fun doing that, but I guess that's not the same as the dev being able to sustain themselves.
Well, it depends, right? Like, and that's part of the benefit of open source is like, maybe you don't have a couple extra bucks a month to spend on like sponsoring a software project, but maybe you do have some development skills. Like you could go look at their open issues in their GitHub, like help them find bugs, or even better, help them solve problems, like help them resolve bugs or implement features. So I do think that like contributing back to open source projects is a really valuable thing. And even as a company, I think we do contribute back when we find things. We, like, you were working with a developer for Authentic earlier this year.
And then that app template Helm chart by BJWS that I think I've talked about here before that I really love had a bug in the latest release, and it was a lot of fun to go look at what it's doing behind the scenes, because I feel like my takeaway was I can help fix a bug, and now I understand the software I'm using better. So it's fun. Yeah,
so I do think contributing is valuable. Obviously, money is nice, but at least contribute something. I think some of the worst offenders for this are companies or people that just take the stuff that the community is building and never give anything at all back. Just kind of
sell it and never give anything at all back.
Yeah. So don't be that guy. I think that's all the news we have. I mean, we're still going to keep using Flux. We're still using Terraform for now.
Although, quick update. Because the Terraform operator controller wasn't CNCF. So we've pivoted and we're using GitHub Action for that now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Pretty well.
Yeah, that is a direct consequence of Weaveworks kind of shutting down.
That's always been a good solution, like using a CI tool for this sort of thing. I think we were just thinking it would be really cool if we could mirror it to our Helm workflows and kind of GitOps our Terraform. But luckily, I mean, we've got a solution. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, and I think I like our solution. It posts a plan output as on a PR in GitHub
request. Yep.
And that was one challenge we had with the operator based flow is if you want it to be truly GitOps, you kind of have to set auto approve to enabled. And we were always a little nervous about just letting that run rampant with no review or anything. So I actually think the solution we've landed on now is a better fit for us, but it is a bummer to see that option of like having a supported Terraform Kubernetes operator taken off the table.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wanted to look into the Weaveworks UI, like the enterprise version, because it had a UI for the Terraform controller. And they have actually open sourced that enterprise version now. I mean, it's not going to be maintained anymore, but I've been considering forking it and keeping dependencies and stuff up to date, at least. I'm sure somebody will. And this is, for all the downsides of open source, this is a big upside. Yeah, company goes out of business and their code isn't gone. Is good.
Right. Like Flux didn't die. Weaveworks Enterprise didn't even die. So that is a big benefit of open source, is that these projects that developers have spent a lot of time on, like they outlive the company. They live on, they can still be used. forked, maintained by somebody new, or maybe the same devs at a new company. Who knows? Because, if you're like, if I leave my company today, I can't generally take the stuff I'm working on with me and keep maintaining it at a new company, right? Unless it was specifically open source. So maybe some of those devs will land somewhere that would allow them to keep working on that project or something like that. So, it's probably not the end of the story for the Weaveworks products, but
yeah,
it is always disappointing to see these kind of more open source friendly companies,
promising companies
not make
have
it.
to either pivot or not make it. Yeah. Pivot in HashiCorp's case and not make it in Weaveworks' case. Hey, I mean, if you have an open source repository that gets moderately popular, it could even be archived in GitHub's like Arctic Code Vault for like 1,000 years. So speaking to longevity, get that stuff archived and it'll outlive us.
All right, let's move on to our main topic this week, which is interviewing a tech CEO. We had the opportunity to record an interview with Matt Williamson, the CEO of Clever. That's Clevyr. In the spirit of full disclosure, he is the CEO for the company that Gabe and I work for.
We haven't actually announced that before now, I think.
No, I don't think so either. So Matt he's our CEO, so he's the big boss around here. He's a super approachable guy, so we had no reservations about sitting down with him and just kind of an open-ended conversation about his experience and his history and kind of what took him from being a developer into the CEO of a small tech company.
Yeah, his background is really cool to hear about. I'm excited for people to hear it. So let's roll the interview.
This week on the podcast, we're interviewing a CEO of a tech company, Matt Williamson. Matt, do you want to give us a quick intro and a little bit of background about yourself and the company you run?
Man, okay. A quick intro is I started Clever in 2009, so we're over 15 years old. We started as a couple of guys writing code in an upstairs from a coffee shop. Now I think we're at 56 employees, and we do everything from custom development through design, build, maintenance, hosting. We've been focused a little bit on AI for probably 5-6 years, more standard ML stuff, right? But in the last, of course, year to now about 6 months, LLM has really increased. And so we focus deeply on that. My personal background is varied and strange. I have a degree in journalism, but I was that kid who grew up with a dad who was a developer in the 70s and 80s. So, Apple IIe strung around the house. Everyone knew what tech was in our home because it was just what dad did, right? And so at like 13, I was the kid writing computer games by copying them out of giant magazines. So like, you could go buy a magazine and it would be like, hey, here's a Conan clone from a Commodore 64. You just have to start writing every line of code. And there would be 10, 15,000 lines of code in a magazine, and you would literally write it back into your Commodore BASIC. And then if you got lucky, it would play. And if you didn't get lucky, you'd spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what you screwed up. So, I was always just that kid who loved tech. And even though I went into the Corps and artillery, there's no technology in artillery, by the way. It was just what I really wanted to do. And so when I got out of college with my degree in journalism, I went straight into kind of the .com world in 95. I started building ISPs, and I was at a company called IONET in 95. And IONET was one of the first, we started as a regional ISP, and then UUNet bought them and they went national. But by then I had moved on and I was already working at the Daily Oklahoman, building their first online newspaper for them. So I've kind of been there and done that.
Nice. Since you have done some operations work and worked like on the operations side of the house, we have a short list of questions that we ask just as kind of getting to know you and a jumping off point for war stories. So I'll run through those real quick if you want, and you can give us your answers.
Fun.
We'll start with the funnest one. What's the worst thing you've ever done to a production environment?
Oh, me personally, we had, so the Daily Oklahoman had a big deck platform back then, like DEC. And you had the ability to walk up to it and yank processors off in real time and it would keep going. You could pull hard drives out of it and it was fine. At least that's what they told us. And so one night in the middle of the night, my buddy and I decided to just go upstairs and see what that really meant. And we yanked a couple of things and it all went down. And he and I looked at each other and honestly, there were two options. It was get in the car and start driving south or just figure it out. And we had about 3 hours to figure it out before some people would start to roll into the company and start needing things. And in about 20 minutes left to spare, the whole system was back up and we never told anyone. So that was not awesome. I should not have done that.
Terrifying. Yeah. I'm sure that was stressful.
It's funny how the salespeople who tell you can pull all the drives out are never in the room when you do it and the thing falls apart, right?
Yeah, it is a sales ploy, and I don't recommend it.
All right. What's your favorite cloud platform, if you have one, and why?
I mean, I guess I try to be agnostic, but me personally, I think GCP is cooler from the development standpoint, but from the sales standpoint and from the letting a more lay person get in and actually do some things, AWS has got their stuff together. And I think that they're just not their UX, because, you log into that system and you're kind of staring at a bunch of links that don't mean anything, it feels like. But once you figure it out, I think it's a lot easier to use than, I feel like you get dropped into GCP and it's kind of like, hope you're a dev. Versus AWS is like, you're probably not a dev, but you need to go, spin up some buckets and figure some things out.
Yeah, and AWS kind of has the buzzwords. Like everybody knows what an S3 bucket is. So it's...
Yeah. I mean, I catch myself saying things like, well, we need an S3 bucket in GCP, which is not a thing.
Right.
But if I say it, everyone knows what I meant.
Yeah, because it's an S3 bucket.
It's an S3 bucket.
What is your favorite language?
Oh, man, I'm old school. Perl, bro. If someone comes to me and said, dude, you by yourself have to go build this thing now. Well, one, we're all in trouble because I haven't been a real dev since 2002. But, and I stopped being a real dev when I went from J2EE into kind of more of the .NET world. It wasn't because I didn't like being a dev. It was because I wasn't a good dev compared to everyone else I knew how to hire. And so, embrace what you're good at and let go of what you're not. But Perl is what I grew up on. And Perl is just incredibly fast, still today, at data manipulation and text manipulation. It's wicked. It was built for it.
Yeah. I mean, there's occasional times when I'm writing a bash script, like a shell script.
Yeah.
Where sed isn't enough. And it's like, all right, I guess I have to whip out Perl.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm ever happy about it, but it always does a great job.
No, I was last night I was talking to my son. He's with another company and he does integrations and APIs. And we were talking about something and I said, just stop, just write this thing in Perl. It's like 3 lines. Cause it was, he was having to SSH into a machine to do a couple of things, to do a thing for another thing. And I was like, lazy Matt would write a little shell script in Perl and I wouldn't even get on the machine. I would just touch a file and it would kick it off and go. And I would just set up either an SSH or a secure copy and be done with it. And, that seems so foreign to most people today. But that's just how I think.
Yeah, very much not DevOps, but hey.
No, it's not.
Perl's tried and true.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's weird for me because I basically was DevOps. I mean, back in the day, when I got hired in 95 at the ISP, it was like they handed me a Solaris box and said, here you go. And I had never touched Solaris at all. I had been, like a DOS kid, obviously, just growing up.
Oh, that's overwhelming.
And so it was overwhelming, but I had a very good mentor, a buddy of mine. We were not buddies then, but I have the ability to find people and say, you're going to help me. And we've been very good friends for 30 years now. And it was all because, you know, at 3 a.m, you're sitting with this guy and you're just watching him build the ISP from scratch by hand. And it was like getting a master's degree. And I just sat there and soaked it up.
That's interesting because in the early days, there was no separation between developers and operations people. You built, you know, on, you know, in the olden days, like you built out the punch cards and you went and ran your code, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And then as the industry matured, you had these silos, and now we're kind of on the other side of that, going back to you build it and you run it.
Yeah.
It's interesting how the cycles work, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, in the mid 90s, it was a thing where it was kind of, people were classifying themselves by accident. We had people at IONET who you realized pretty quickly they could build they could build a website and it would look like trash, but it would work and it would run. And then you had people who could build a website and it would be beautiful and probably not run. And so pretty soon you're trying to get those two guys together. And the guy that built it to run in the back end is also the guy who's going to help you deploy it. And, you know, it wasn't called deploying. It was just, hell, 99% of the time, you were just writing your code in production live at the moment because it's probably down anyway. So it's not like you were hurting anything. And we didn't, you know, there wasn't Git. There wasn't
FTP in.
Well, we didn't even FTP in because we were just sitting on the Linux box that was our window, that was our web server, nice. You know? I mean, you know.
Yeah, all this stuff was on-prem, right? It was in your office under the desk.
If someone said the web's down, the first thing I'd do is I'd look at the little green light on my Solaris 1 box and go, it shouldn't be. It looks like my machine's up. So why is the web down? And, you know, pretty soon you pull top and you start looking around and you're like, well, okay, Apache locked. And I don't know why. And I've got to go figure out what the hell just happened to Apache.
Gotta love Apache.
Or then Nginx, right? And, you know, for a long time it was just Apache. And then pretty soon you've got Nginx in front of it and you're starting to define roles inside of the machine, not just roles that the devs are doing.
So speaking of Solaris, how long have you been using Unix?
I mean, you know,
was that? That was like
that was 95.
95.
And so we were everybody was a Solaris shop because your choices were like AIX or Solaris or, you know, a couple other different distros out there. And then pretty quick you've got, you know, BSD running around but you know, growing up on Solaris, I was System 5 Release 4. And so there were ways that I thought things should work. It's like, I know things are going to be in user local bin. I know things are going to be in Etsy. I know these things are going to sit there. And then you work on someone else's machine and it's running AIX and you just look at it and go, I don't know what to do. Someone has to tell me all these things. So pretty soon you're making symbolic links so that it feels like Solaris, which is stupid, but now I can work again. And so pretty soon you've got like a bunch of dot files that you have to move back and forth with yourself. And, you know, you get on someone's machine and the first thing you do is you secure copy from your box to their box, a bunch of profile settings so that you can work on it. And it's just what it was.
What about Linux? Was it like a similar frustration or was it closer?
Well, so we didn't jump to Linux until like 97, 98 when it started to get a little more stable.
Stable, yeah.
Yeah, but we did jump pretty quickly to Solaris x86, which was a version of Solaris that was compiled to run on just a Pentium 100 x86 chip, you know, so
what were Solaris boxes running before x86?
RISC.
Okay. So like, probably wasn't PowerPC then, but is Motorola processors?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we went through an SGI phase, right? So like late 95, when I was at IONET, I didn't really get hired at IONET. I hired myself at IONET. I called one day to get off of AOL. It was January 3rd, 1995. I remember the date. I called IONET and I said, hey, I want to sign up. And the lady goes, call back, click. And I looked at my phone and thought, the hell just happened? And I called back. And the lady answers and she says, IONET, call back, click. And that went on like 2 more times. And finally I said, stop. Where are you? And the lady goes, I'm at the corner of I'm at the corner of Council and Expressway, and we're called Johnson Computer. And I was like, cool, see ya. I just got in my car and drove up there wearing, a grungy shirt and my jeans and whatever. And I walk in and it's Johnson Computer and they sell PCs and networks. They were like a Novell shop, And I walk in and there's this, a lady sitting up front, and I just said, I'm here for IONET. And she said, oh yeah, they're back there in the back. And I go in and there's a woman sitting on a cardboard table with 3 phones and a stack of like mimeographed paper, like not Xerox, right? Just like school mimeograph paper. And she's filling out these signups. And I sat there and I watched her for a minute, and she didn't even look up. And I walked over and I picked up the phone and I said, IONET. And I just started filling out people who wanted to get signed up. And it went on for hours. I just sat there for hours doing this. And finally, this other guy walks in. He walks in, he puts something on the desk. He's wearing like a really nice suit, like a vest, and he looks great. He looks like a G-man from the 50s. And he walks in and he hands her a document, and then he turns around and he goes, who the hell are you? And I literally like cupped the phone and I went, I'm Matt and I take orders. And he went, huh. And he walked off. And after like another hour, it's after 5, the lady finally goes, okay, stop taking orders. We're done for the night. And then she goes, but I need to know who you are right now. And I said, well, actually, I called a couple of times and I couldn't get through. You kept hanging up on me. And it was manic. I mean, the phone was just ringing continually. And she said, so you just decided to sit down and start taking orders? And I said, you were busy. And I wanted to walk out of here with my floppy disks and go home and load it up, but you were busy and I wanted to help. And so I just never left. Like that was my job. They just said, cool, you're the first employee, I guess. And, so I worked myself into tech support just because I knew what a computer was and how to work it. I did not know Unix yet. I barely could use Trumpet Windsock, which you had to use. And about 6 months later, I'm running the tech support. There's like 30 employees. And I started to complain loudly because our sales were not great. And her name was Phyllis Frodsham. And she was a tech pioneer in Oklahoma City. And I mouthed off once to her that I didn't think our sales guys knew what the hell was going on. And she goes, congratulations, you're the sales manager. Go buy a suit, show up tomorrow, and you're going to move from your tech department over to the sales department, and you're in charge. And that ruffled a bunch of feathers, but I started just selling the internet. And so pretty soon I'm selling T1s and T3s to Kerr McGee and a bunch of other companies in town. And I started selling, I realized that I knew what the Silicon Graphics was and I knew how powerful it was. And I had seen something where people were running radars on SGI boxes. So I just called Silicon Graphics and I said, I'm going to start selling your decks. And they said, cool, we'll send you one. I mean, cool, we'll send you one. They sent us an SGI box. And I drove around town to channel 4, 5, and 9 here in Oklahoma City. And I would just walk in and I'd say, I need to speak to the guy who does your weather radar. And, some guy comes out wearing glasses with tape on them, and they just don't even know what's about to happen. And I sit them down and I grab a monitor and I put this SGI box down and I start talking about what it can do, and started selling SGI boxes. And it was it was the Wild West of the internet,
That's great. It's like how YouTubers get products to review nowadays, but no paperwork. You just ask for it.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Yeah. It was weird.
Tell us a little bit about your move from being a hands-on developer, because you were for a time, right?
Mm-hmm,
you weren't always running around selling internet services to random companies you weren't employed by. But tell us a little bit about moving from a developer into being the CEO of a company. How did that happen for you?
Oh, well, I guess I'll foreshadow this with a story from my first night in the Marine Corps. So in the Marine Corps, when you get there, you stand on these yellow lines. It's MCRD, California, a Marine Corps Recruit Depot, California, San Diego. You get on these yellow lines. They walk you through. They start shoving things in your hands, all this stuff. And some drill instructor takes you to a big bay and says, this is where you're going to sleep until you get picked up for your training days. And he's basically like, shut the F up. sit down, be quiet, read your book. And people start talking. And he opens the door and screams at everyone, shut the hell up, go back to bed, start reading your book, whatever. And this goes on 2 or 3 times. And finally they were doing it again. And I knew we were going to get in trouble. So I just yelled, everyone shut the hell up. I'm not going to be in trouble for you idiots. And he runs out of this door screaming, who the hell said that? Like 60 guys point at me and I'm like, I'm dead. This is stupid. And he goes, you're in charge. Shut them up. And I realized pretty quickly, like, just do what they ask, figure it out later, and you'll be fine. And that was kind of what I did in work when I had gone from being a true developer and I'd gone from, Perl to C to Java. J2EE was like the big platform back then, right? And I had been moving through the jobs and starting to get people under me and kind of, it's not like I was mentoring people. Look, I was never the dev who blew people away with my code, but I was the guy who would sit in a room and go, well, why don't we do this? And everyone would laugh and go, that's dumb. And then a second later they go, oh no, that's smart. Like, for instance, I was working for another ISP one day and we had a bunch of work we were doing with databases, but they had a bunch of FoxPro databases. And you guys are not old enough to have probably ever played with FoxPro, but it did not like spaces in the naming convention. Okay. But all of the databases we had already set up had these spaces and were, named correctly and blah, blah, blah. And there's this company sitting there with me and a couple other guys and they're talking about it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to go rebuild all those FoxPro stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I just said, well, why don't we just make a symbolic link? And then who cares what the name is? Call it Bob. And everyone's like, that's so stupid. And then one of the guys goes, oh God, that works. It's like I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I can figure some things out. And so what happened when I went from being the dev to the manager is real quickly you atrophy and like my development skills go away. I can read code. I mean, I'll read we've got geniuses running around Clever and I can read their code and most of the time I get it. I'm not going to write that. I'm never going to sit down from scratch and write it again. That's just not who I am. So when I started Clever, it was just because I was still in fintech and it was late 2008 and early 2009 was a really bad time in the market. Lots of companies are failing. Lots of stuff is getting pulled out. And I was with a small startup starting to build an online banking platform. I had previously worked in fintech for a company that had been purchased. And I knew I didn't want to do that again. But when I got laid off, I just said, well, listen, I don't want to go back and let someone else lay me off again. I don't want to be, at someone else's mercy. I think I'm going to try this. And just honestly, I just looked around at some of the friends I knew and I was like, listen, I'm going to try this and I'm going to need help. I'm not a front end guy. I'm not a back end guy anymore. I'm not going to be the guy who sits down and writes the code all night, but I think I can sell it. And so pretty soon I've got some guys who said, let's go do this thing. And just my nature is for me, when I was starting this, I just decided I'd rather have partners than employees. And so I just said, listen, we were sitting at a little pizza place here in the city called Sauced, and it was outside. And I just looked at them and I said, listen, equal partners, let's just go do this thing together. And I guess for a couple of reasons, but the main reason was I wanted them to have as much skin in the game as I had. And I knew there were going to be hard times and I knew there were going to be good times, but in the hard times, it's your pride of your ownership that keeps you there. And in the good times, it's that ownership that helps you grow it. So that was just where I went. I don't know that, listen, I'm not the best business guy. I'm definitely not the best salesperson at all. I don't really sell. What I do is I just kind of blue sky and kind of engineer in my head to get to where we're going to go. I'm not great at asking for money. And, that's why I've got people who are good at asking for money. And my thing is just, I'm a Libra. I want people to like me, I guess, to a fault. But what I really want to do is I want to solve people's problems and make it so that, you know, I say this all the time. Oklahoma City is a really small town. I mean, you know, we're the 20th largest city in America, but I don't go to a restaurant and not see people that I know. And I run into people at the grocery store and at the lake, and, you know, it's just the smallest big city. And what I wanted to do was, when I walked into a local restaurant, I wanted to know that if I saw someone, they want to give me a high five or a hug and buy me a drink, instead of being like, oh, damn, that guy again. And so, you know, I don't have an ethos or a credo or whatever, other than we just have to do a good job, because we're not marketing. So the only marketing we've got is when we do a good job and someone tells someone to call us. I don't know that I answered anything you asked, Mitchell.
No, I like it.
I like it. Really quick, I find it interesting that you still do that, like dreaming in meetings. Like I've seen this a few times. Like, we're thinking through something and you're just like, what if we do it this way? And it's like the same response. I'm like, no, Matt, well, wait, hang on. Maybe. I feel like that still happens.
Yeah, that's an important skill to have. And it's something that a lot of developers and tech-focused people, they don't develop that skill, which is, tech folks are really good at getting it down in the weeds. And not a lot of the time can they take a step back and like reassess, okay, this is the general direction we're going in. Is this right? Are we asking the right questions? So yeah, that's a super valuable skill to have, even if you're not the one coding or
implementing,
slinging servers, or exactly.
Sure. You know, so growing up, my best friend, this guy, Troy, we lived across the street from each other, and we were just like, we're both little geeky nerds, you know, Star Trek, Star Wars, building computers. So we gelled immediately. He, to this day, is a phenomenal developer. He's a VP here in the city, working in a bank or a banking company. So I'm growing up with this kid, and I'm an okay guy. Like, I can figure out the logic and I can make it work. He's a great dev. And so I had the ability to not have to sit with my hands on the keyboard. And I was the guy thinking up, well, ooh, why don't we do this? And 99% of the time he would go, that's not a good idea. And I'll tell you why. And as he's telling me why, he talks himself into it. And that's still kind of my MO. Like, you know, my CTO, Jason Post, my partner, he and I have been working together since 2002. So, you know, we've grown up together in a lot of ways. And still today, we'll be in meetings and I start talking and I see his eyes like, you know, he's like, God damn it, here he goes. He's going to say some stupid shit and I'm going to have to figure out how to do it. But I'm 99% of the time, every time I've ever said something that I know is BS, science fiction, it's probably not going to work. It works. Jason figures it out. Or, you know, my DevOps team is geniuses, no names. Our AI architect is that guy who, when I start talking, and I actually say this in most of the meetings that he's in, because I need to give a frame of reference, because when I start talking, he's going to grimace. But when I start talking and I start blue skying and just imagineering, I guess is the right way to say it, he, the AI architect, gets frustrated and maybe even a little perturbed with me. And I know that because we talk a lot. But 99% of the time he says, bro, no, that's not going to be a thing. 10, 15 minutes later after the meeting, he walks by and he goes, I figured it out. Here's how we're going to do it. I just love that.
Awesome. I think you've got a hard stop in a few minutes and we got a notification that a service is down. So is there anything you want is there anything you want to pitch or anything you want to talk about where our listeners could go get more information about Clever? Or ideally buy some stuff from you? Man, so here's the thing. It's not like I've got a small set of products or services. We're a company designed to do everything. We will do the discovery with the client. We have a phenomenal design team. Our UI UX stuff is incredible. The software developers are the best I've ever met. And I'll stack us up against Google, Microsoft, Amazon any day.
And at the end of the day, our CI/CD pipelines and our DevOps guys, I mean, keep the damn internet running. And so there's nothing we can't do, which makes it really hard to tell someone to come talk to us because we can do it all. So, I guess what I would say is it's clever.com and it's CLEVYR. I guess you'll put that in the notes or something. And by the way, we're about to relaunch clever.com in a week or two. It'll have a lot more focus on some of the newer technologies coming along. But yeah, I'm excited about it.
Thanks a lot,
All
Matt.
right. Later,
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you.
And on the other note, let me know when the service is up.
No worries. We'll do.
Later.
Hey, it's just Mitchell and Gabe again. Hope you enjoyed it. I want to give a big thanks to Matt Williamson for letting us interview him. He's a great guy, and let us know if you'd like to hear more in the future, or let us know if there's, anyone else, any other role or anything like that you'd like to hear. We'd love to do more interviews. It's always fun talking with people and bridging the gap, like DevOps does.
Thanks for listening. Our website is podcastascode.show. If you would like to suggest topics for us to cover or have feedback on topics we have covered, send us an email. Our address is contact@podcastascode.show, or you can hit us up on our Discord. Join us in a fortnight for more DevOps content.
Thanks for listening.